Dan Lanning was back at the podium. Here's what stood out.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. 3 Oregon players up for the Nagurski Award given to the best defensive player in all of college football, and thoughts on how the Big Ten helps Oregon in recruiting. Trivia is back. I might never let it leave, even during the season. Now, during the season, we might have to put it on pause. But off season, I don't think that's going anywhere because, boy, you guys are really, really loving it. So, Dan Lanning had the Oregon Media Day and had a 20-minute press conference. You can go check out his full remarks on YouTube. There are a bunch of other great interviews with players as well. I was not there in person as I was at Las Vegas's Big Ten Media Days, but few things stood out when I listened to Coach Lanning's remark. The first thing that I thought was interesting and hadn't really processed in my mind before is with how Oregon's season is structured with their buys, and it's much different than last year. They kind of have 3 seasons, or at least that's how Lanning put it. You know, like there are 3 parts, 3 segments. There's kind of, you know, the way I'm looking at it, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And what I liked about that framing of this upcoming season for Oregon is the month of November is significantly more difficult, really, than any other month that Oregon actually has on the schedule. After they play the Iowa game, they have a bye for the first week of November, right after Halloween. And then the month of November goes like this: at Iowa, hosts Minnesota, hosts USC, at Washington. I think pretty clearly that's the toughest stretch that Oregon has. They play their first 5 games, they have a bye, play a few more, and then those final 3. But what I like about this setup and the way Lanning put it is this is going to be, and Lanning's talked about this a lot too, you know, he's excited, and believe you me, I think that's how you say that. I, too, am excited to see what these young guys can put on the field because there are going to be a lot of new faces. There are going to be a lot of young guys that are getting playing time, and Lanning talked about that in his presser as well. The exciting thing to me is that by phase 3 of this season, November, is when I think Oregon will be playing its best football. And I think you can see a pretty sizable leap from the caliber of football Oregon is playing from the start of the season to the end of the season. You're going to have a bunch of big games under your belt. You have just a bunch of games under your belt as well. You know, Dante Moore will, by the time they go to Iowa, he will have already traveled to Rutgers. He will have already traveled to Penn State. He will have traveled to Northwestern, and he'll have 8 games under his belt. And so having that bye, you know, the 4 games that preceded are Wisconsin and Rutgers, and then Indiana and Penn State as well. Having that bye tossed in there, I think is just kind of an interesting clean break way of looking at, okay, how do you handle this first segment? How do you handle the next one? How do you handle the next one? So, you know, phase 1 for Oregon this year is really manageable, incredibly workable, and then it's Penn State. And then you got to bye. Then you come back in phase 2, and I think overall, even though Penn State is Oregon's toughest game, you get a little bit tougher. But the team will have 5 games of experience under their belt. I think they'll probably have a loss to Penn State in there. But imagine if they've got to win. I will be a very excited wrong podcaster on this very show at that point in time. Then you go through phase 2, it gets a little tougher, and then you've got to bye. Then you've got to go to Iowa. You end the season going to Washington, and sandwich in between are home games with Minnesota and USC. Don't sleep on Minnesota, by the way. I haven't done a full deep dive on them this offseason, but the Golden Gophers are a program that's always solid. Like, they're similar to Iowa in a sense. Very high floor, not as high of a ceiling as other programs, but can definitely get you and the running back Darius Taylor one of the best in the Big Ten coming into the year. Mekhi Hughes is generating all sorts of buzz right now, and deservedly so, because I think he can be really good. But Darius Taylor, for my money, along with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen over at Penn State, those are probably the three best running backs in the Big Ten coming into this year. So that was the first thing that I thought was really interesting. Lanning pointed out about how the buys kind of divide up the season. Second thing is, okay, well, first, before I get there, honorable mention, top standout from what Lanning said. His ability to never, and I mean never, say anything more than he wants to or answer a question he doesn't want to is so good. I know he's done this for several years now as Oregon's head coach entering year 4. I just always get amused by it. Sometimes a question will get asked, hey, what do you want to improve on the most with this sort of thing? Well, I'm not going to tell you that, but there are always things we want to get better at. I get a kick out of it personally. He does give some really, really good answers. The questions I asked him at media days, I thought he was very thoughtful and genuine with what he had to say. If you missed that interview, go listen to Friday's show. There are all sorts of interviews from Vegas down there. But he's also really consistent on the competition being open at basically every position group on the field. We can theorize that's not entirely true. Dylan Thieneman's going to start. Mateo's going to start. There's not an open battle for one of the starting safety spots. For the other one, there is. And, Mekhi Hughes talked about how he likes seeing his younger brother, get ready for that storyline to come back, Naeem Offord, run with the 1s and 2s on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe that's at nickel. Maybe that's at outside corner. Tosh Lupoy said a while back that, he's not making the transition to safety. So maybe the highest rated DB recruit in Oregon history is going to have a sizable role this year. Dan Lanning mentioned Kingston Lopa as another guy that, didn't do a lot, but got better as the season progressed. And then in the Big Ten championship game, had a really important role to go out there and guard Tyler Warren on third down, obvious passing situations. So the receiver room, though, was one that he got asked about and, said, obviously, you never like seeing an injury to a guy like Evan Stewart, a proven veteran that has, done so much for Oregon in just the one season. But it does create an opportunity. And he said, nope, that's going to get battled out in fall camp. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But if you gave me, a prediction, drop them in the YouTube comments below, of who the 4 most snapped Oregon wide receivers are going to be, I'm not going to place a high level of, you can put them in Spencer's scale of agreement if you like, but I think I'm going to place a pretty high level of, yes, I can see that happening to a lot of different combinations there. But he said that's going to get battled out in fall camp, and that he's excited to see, where they have to improve and what, sorts of potential shortcomings, young guys have that have to be improved upon. And the good news for him is he's got an incredibly veteran staff. This is year 3. Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoy, and Will Stein. Go look at major college football, any college football, frankly. At FCS, Group of 5, Power 4, I don't care. That's a rarity. And I do think that is an advantage, and one of the reasons I am confident, despite all the turnover Oregon has on the roster, that they're still going to be a 10-11 win team in all likelihood this year and should be expected to get back to the playoff. You got crazy coaching continuity, and that is a really, really good thing. The other comment that stood out to me a little bit is he said, I've been a part of teams that have played 5 linebackers before. Well, that would be cool to see 5 linebackers rotating around. Does Oregon have 5 linebackers that are ready? They might need to. I think the most common number there, that stood out. I was like, whoa, 5 in a 4-2-5 system. Maybe he's counting, Mateo as an outside linebacker in there, but I think they're mostly talking about second level guys. You're gonna have 5 guys rotating through. Hey, that'd be great. Keep guys fresh, good competitive depth, be able to survive injuries. Hey, I'm here for it. But I think that 3 to 4 is the most likely number. I like Jerry Mixon, talked about him a bit on yesterday's show, but the 3 redshirt freshmen, Mathuti, Williams, and Platt, one of them is going to have to be able to step up and fill some kind of role. I think it's just a matter of how big exactly. So Drop everything that I mentioned in the YouTube comments below, but Dan Lanning at Oregon Media Day, that was what stood out the most to me. Award season is always fun, always exciting. And Oregon's got 3 guys up for one award that makes me ask a question. First, this episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink without the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, both are acceptable. This one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course and off of it too, you need a little extra boost to stay sharp and energized. That is where 5 Hour Energy comes in. If you're wanting to play more holes or you got to power through just to get an 18-hole round in because maybe you're at a public course and it's taking 5.5 hours, 5 Hour Energy is the perfect kind of pick-me-up. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. My favorite promo code in the history of the network. This offer is only valid until September 30th. On one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Alrighty, let's roll along. Dylan Thieneman, Mateo Uiagalelei, Bryce Betcher are all on the preseason award watch list for the Nagurski, which is given to the best defensive player in all of college football. And I think it's awesome that those guys are, in that sort of camp and get that sort of national love and respect. There's still that part of me, even though Oregon's been a huge national brand for a long time, that anytime a player, a coach, or a team or whatever gets into, the national spotlight in a big way, I still have that sense inside me of like, oh, hey, that's cool. That doesn't happen all the time. Even though with Oregon, obviously, it happens a pretty good amount. Like Kenyon Sadiq at Big Ten Media Days last week was easily Oregon's most buzzed about player. I mean, Dante Moore got plenty of conversation and talk and all that sort of stuff. And, when I did radio hits, I got questions about him. But Kenyon Sadiq came up a lot, and I'm really excited to watch him. And, Dan Lanning's had a lot of glowing things to say about him as well. And how could you not? Guy could be one of the most exciting players in college football this year. But bringing this back to the defensive side of the ball, if, those that are on the voting committee, whatever you call it, panel for the Nagurski put, Thieneman, Mateo, and Betcher on the list, in their view, those are probably Oregon's 3 best defenders. I think that's a pretty solid case to make. My question to all of you, and what I want to hear your thoughts on, is which of those guys do you think is the best defender for Oregon this year? It's kind of a tough question. Now, for the award specifically, to me, Mateo would be the most likely one to, seriously get into that consideration because, Betcher, we all remember a tackling menace last year, led Oregon in tackles and just exploded onto the scene a bit and, did such a great job when Bossa was injured to fill in the void. He was awesome all season long. But he had 94 tackles. The leading tacklers in college football last year had over 160. And I think it's a good thing that Betcher probably can't seriously make a run at that award because I think, as we heard, as I was talking about earlier, with regards to Lanning's comments on linebackers, there are going to be too many guys playing for Betcher to rack up that many tackles. Doesn't mean he won't get a lot. Of course he will. He stays healthy the whole year. I bet you he hits 100 because he doesn't have Jeffrey Bossa there. He is the number one guy. And we'll see if Devin Jackson gets fully healthy. Like, Betcher is becoming, with potential for Jackson to be limited from time to time. That makes Betcher a more and more important defensive player for the Ducks. But 150 to 160 tackles is a lot. And I think that Oregon's defense has got too much depth to put up stats like that. But then I went to Dylan Thieneman and said, well, if Thieneman racks up interceptions, that could absolutely be a guy that, garners that sort of attention. I mean, this guy's probably one of the 5-10 best safeties in all of college football this year. We all know Caleb Downs at Ohio State is the best, and I think Notre Dame's got a guy that everybody really likes, and will probably be an NFL draft pick, or at least they usually do. And Thieneman's definitely up there. He had a bit of a step back season, according to Pro Football Focus, in 2024, Purdue went 1-11. So what exactly went right? Nothing, really. And so I think his potential is immense. I think he could be the best safety individually that Oregon has had since Dan Lanning got there. I think it's been the weakest position group for the defense over the last 3 seasons consistently. We saw that get exploited in the Rose Bowl, of course. But the reason I come back to Mateo is, when you're looking at these sorts of awards and, how a player can generate the right sort of narrative and attention and hype to get people to actually vote for him, some of it does have to start in the preseason, right? Like Kenyon Sadiq winning the Mackey Award for the best tight end in college football. Jake Butt of the Big Ten Network, former Mackey Award winner himself, talked about that on my show on Friday and thinks that's entirely possible. That to me is very real because there is a little bit of foundation being laid right now. There were a lot of media members there at Big Ten Media Days in Vegas, and they all saw Kenyon Sadiq being there as one of Oregon's players that they brought. And that's not by accident. And it just helps get your name out there and get people to recognize, oh, this guy could have a special sort of season. Then if you go out and put up the stats to match that, then, things start to trend in the right direction there. Mateo, I think, would be the most likely of these guys to get that award because he's going to have a lot of sacks. At least he should. 10.5 as a true sophomore last year is crazy good work. And, he talked to me last week about wanting to be better on the mental side of things and, understanding not just what his own assignment is, but what other guys' assignments are and how that can help him be a better member of the defense. But, at some point, I'm sure I'll get to stat predictions for, players and groups and whatnot. And, of course, Oregon's record for the season before the year begins. I'm not putting Mateo below 11 sacks. I'm probably going to look in the 12, 13 sort of range. And, if he wants to be seen as the best defender in all of college football, he's got the talent to do it. No question in my mind. He has the tools to do that. He has to be probably a bit more impactful against the run, at the same level that he rushes the passer, but he needs to be 70 to 80% as effective against the run as he is when, it's 3rd down 8 and he needs to go make a play to get the defense off the field. So I think that's awesome that those guys get that recognition. And, as I was thinking about how to answer my own question, I do lean on Mateo as, the best defender individually that Oregon has. He also plays in a group that has crazy depth and talent. I don't think they're quite as good as last year, but I still think that defensive line is one of the best in all of college football. So curious to hear if you guys would go towards Thieneman or Betcher for Oregon's best defender here in 2025. And the season, by the way, is officially 1 month away as this show airs, which is exciting. So let's get back to Spencer's scale of agreement. I love these. Just love it. Yesterday, guys were killing it. You keep killing it with the SSA segments. I guess it's the SSA takes, and the trivia questions as well. David, Spencer's level of agreement. Spencer's scale of agreement. Yeah. Why do we have a playoff committee? Why not hire the best odds makers in Vegas to pick the 12 teams? Is there any doubt they'd get 12 best? This is a 3. I am more pro-committee than most. I'm placing a 3 on the sentiment, because this isn't so much a statement as a question. But I look at what the committee's done in the last several years in the playoff, and I can't think of a single example where I disagreed with who they included and who they didn't. So the reason you have them in there is the number system and only numbers gave us the BCS. They do use computer analytics to determine, strength of schedule and that sort of stuff. So it's not as if some of the things that go into making odds in Vegas or that went into the BCS calculation are just not being used by the committee. They just consider other things as well. And I want a combination to keep urgency on the regular season of the best and most deserving teams in college football. If I were a committee member, I would assign a 20-point scale, and I'd give you a 1 to 10 rating based on best, which is reflective of what I have seen from you on the field this year, the results and the caliber of your play, the opponents you've gone up against and how you fared, and then 1 through 10, basically just your record, right? Because the most deserving team, or the quote-unquote more deserving team, might not be the best team necessarily. Good example, Oregon played Liberty in the 2023 Fiesta Bowl. Liberty was the most deserving group of 5 team. They weren't the best group of 5 team. So if I were, analyzing Liberty's G5, if they had a 12-team playoff that year, if I was analyzing their, playoff resume, I'd say, okay, you're a 10 on most deserving, but you're about a 3 on best because of your strength of schedule. So that'd give you 13 points. Whereas, if Tulane went 11-2 with losses to Oklahoma, Kansas State, and a win over Memphis and a good Army team or something in the American Championship game and maybe a Power 4 win somewhere, then I'd say, okay, you're not as deserving. I'll give you an 8 on that. But best for the group of 5, I might give them a 9, right? 17, greater than 13, Tulane gets the edge. So I don't think that's exactly how the committee does it necessarily. That's how I would do it if I were a committee member. So the reason you have them is so that it's not just a purely analytical calculation and you can take into account more factors as well. I don't have a problem with the committee existing as it does. I think they keep getting it right. I know that's not a popular opinion. People want to get rid of the committee and make it as a whole other conversation. Check out today's episode of Locked On College Football. Josh Payton and I talked about all that sort of stuff for a good 40 minutes or so. It was a fun chat. So, recruiting trivia is how we conclude today's show. All right, Ian sends this one in. Take for Spencer's scale of agreement. The Pac-12 before realignment was more difficult to win than the Big Ten is now. The Pac-12 was deeper, and we played more good football teams than the top-heavy Big Ten. More difficult to win? Well, just because you view a league as being more top-heavy, and I assume your last impression of the Pac-12 was our last impression of the Pac-12, RIP, in which the league was deeper than I ever remember it being. I mean, in the same conference, in the same year, you had Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Cam Ward, that's 2 number 1 picks and a top 10 pick at quarterback and a number 12 overall pick at quarterback, in the same conference that had the best Oregon State team since probably 2013 and was ranked inside the top 20 for most of the year. That was just that. And oh, by the way, you had Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, Noah Fafita at Arizona with then Arizona, now Washington head coach Jed Fish. That league was stupidly deep. And Kenny Dillingham was in year 1. We know what he turned his program into year 2. So I don't think the Big Ten's depth gets enough credit, frankly. My preseason Big Ten power rankings have got Illinois at 4, Indiana at 5, after, Oregon being 3, Ohio State 2, and Penn State at number 1. But those teams in the middle, the Minnesotas this year, Washington could be in that fold. I actually think the Big Ten is really, really deep. And I know the last iteration of the Pac-12 was incredibly deep. But that's not to say that makes it easier. I think it might be easier to get to the championship game. It's not actually easier to win the championship game because as we've seen, the last 2 Big Ten champs have gone on to win the national championship. So the path might be on average tougher week to week, but when the conference championship game is more difficult to win, I don't think I can get on board with it was more hard to win than the Big Ten. Because the Pac-12 always had its fair share, as every conference does, of middling to below average teams. So I do see what you're going for. I'll put a 3.5. I'll put a 3.5 on that one there, which leads me to the next Pac-12 question, and then a thought on recruiting before I get to trivia for today. Nathan, what was the Old World Pac-12's overall record in 2024? 12 teams records combined, and how does it compare to the last few seasons' records? So it didn't actually change a whole heck of a lot from when they were in the Pac-12, which, probably got pretty consistent because you were mostly playing each other for 9 conference games each year. But in 2024, the old Pac-12 was 82-71. In 2023, 88-66. 2022, 84 and 69. What I started thinking about when you asked this question, Nathan, was something that, I discussed when Oregon made the move to the Big Ten. I understood why they were doing it, and because it was clear and obvious to see why they were doing it. They didn't want to get left behind. If the Pac-12 had stayed together, I don't think Oregon's recruiting would be that different than it is now. I have spoken with too many people that cover and know recruiting well, like Brian Smith, who's on this show a lot, that say it helps. But really, it comes down to a couple of players. Now, it can be really, highly rated, impactful guys. But the way that Brian has kind of described it to me before is like if you'd had the Pac-12 with USC stick together and Oregon continued down the path they were on, they were going to be an elite program on the trail and on the field no matter what. And I've made that point several times recently too, which is that no matter what changes have been thrown at Oregon, they adapt and succeed. That has just been a constant. There have been a lot of different things that have, changed in the sport over the years, and Oregon is just always there, always good. And they're always really committed to winning as well. And so the Big Ten, I think, helps Oregon get a couple of guys, maybe. I'm not trying to say that it isn't, helpful, right? Maybe instead of, this is just hypothetical, maybe instead of Decorrian Moore and Naeem Offord, it'd be Decorrian Moore or Naeem Offord. And Offord can be a game-changing defensive back for Oregon one day. Were they going to be unable to find a talented recruit otherwise in this hypothetical scenario? No. So I just was thinking about that because the impact is definitely there, but I think it's, one or two guys. That's the difference from going from 8 to 10 to, 3 to 5 in the recruiting rankings nationally. That can be, if it's a really highly rated guy, the difference in there. So, yeah, Pac-12, RIP, forever and always. Following up on yesterday's trivia clues, I went 0 for 2, but boy, I'm pretty happy with the guess I had. When did the Oregon Ducks football program first field a team? My guess was 1896. It was 1894. That would have been a cool poll, but oh well. LaMichael James became the first ever Pac-12 player in conference history. Lots of Pac-12 stuff today. With 3 1,500-plus yard seasons. And he came to rank blank on the Pac-12's career rushing list. He was second at the time when he left. LaMichael James is actually now fourth because he has been passed by Myles Gaskin at Washington. And do you know, here's the trivia that I found out, and I will pose to all of you, and you can try to answer in 5 seconds, who the Pac-12's leading rusher all time is. 5, 4, 3, 2, get it in, 1, here we go. Royce Freeman, 5,621 yards. The Pac-12's all-time leading rusher, and I don't think that's going to change. So, LaMichael is behind Freeman, Gaskin, and Charles White of USC, who had the record until Freeman broke it in his Oregon career. So, trivia questions for today. Here we go. What was the score of Oregon's worst loss in history? This had to have been before my time. 49-3 wasn't the worst ever against Georgia, right? I don't think so, no. I bet there was a shutout in there. I'll go 52-0. What was the score of that same game the previous year? This is a good little pairing here. This is going deep into the archive. Maybe so I don't sound like such a fool. Maybe I should. I'm saying maybe. I'm not saying do this. Maybe I should ask. No, I'm not gonna limit the window. I got to expand my 20th century Oregon football knowledge. The score of that same game the previous year, I'll go opposite end of the spectrum and say 6-3. But I don't know who it was against, and I'm guessing here. This one I do know. I didn't even look it up because I'm so sure of the answer. Which Oregon player first coined the term natty as it is used today? That would be a one Cliff Harris, hero of the 2010 game at Cal, which aired on the Versus Network. Oregon's only touchdown was his punt return. That fueled the first 12-0 season in Oregon history and the run to the national championship game, of course. So, I'm probably going 1 for 3 there, but you know what? if you went 1 for 3 every day in baseball, you'd be a Hall of Famer. So I guess I'll take it. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.